I hope to stand firm enough to not go backward, and yet not go forward fast enough to wreck the country's cause. I go for all sharing the privileges of the government, who assist in bearing its burdens. Consequently, I go for admitting all whites to the right of suffrage, who pay taxes or bear arms. It is rather for us here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Someday I shall be president. I am humble Abraham Lincoln. I have been solicited by my friends to become a candidate for the legislature. My politics are short and sweet, like the old woman's dance. I learned a great many years ago that in a fight between husband and wife, a third party should never get between the woman's skillet and the man's axe helve. I have talked with great men, and I do not see how they differ from others. Allow the president to invade a neighboring nation whenever he shall deem it necessary to repel an invasion, and you allow him to do so whenever he may choose to say he deems it necessary for such purpose, and you allow him to make war at pleasure. It is with your aid, as the people, that I think we shall be able to preserve, not the country, for the country will preserve itself, but the institutions of the country, those institutions which have made us free, intelligent, and happy. The most free, the most intelligent, and if I like a thing, it just sticks after once reading it or hearing it. If I like a thing, the people themselves, and not their servants, can safely reverse their own deliberate decisions. If you think you can slander a woman into loving you, or a man into voting for you, try it till you are satisfied. For my part, I desire to see the time when education, and by its means, morality, sobriety, enterprise, and industry, shall become much more general than at present, and should be gratified to have it in my power to contribute something to the advancement of any measure which might have a tendency to accelerate the happy period. If the people of Utah shall peacefully form a state constitution tolerating polygamy, will the democracy admit them into the Union? I never went to school more than 6 months in my life, but I can say this, that among my earliest recollections, I remember how, when a mere child, I used to get irritated when anybody talked to me in a way I could not understand. I have always hated slavery, I think, as much as any abolitionist. I have been an old line Whig. I have always hated it, but I have always been quiet about it until this new era of the introduction of the Nebraska Bill began. Our Declaration of Independence was held sacred by all and thought to include all. But now, to aid in making the bondage of the Negro universal and eternal, it is assailed, sneered at, construed, hawked at, and torn till, if its framers could rise from their graves, they could not at all recognize it, being elected to Congress, though I am very grateful to our friends for having done it, has not pleased me as much as I expected. If I were to try to read, much less answer, all the attacks made on me, this shop might as well be closed for any other business. In my view of the present aspect of affairs, there is no need of bloodshed and war. There is no necessity for it. I am not in favor of such a course, and I may say in advance, there will be no bloodshed unless it be forced upon the government. The government will not use force unless force is used against it. I believe this government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free. It is a quality of revolutions not to go by old lines or old laws, but to break up both and make new ones. Extemporaneous speaking should be practiced and cultivated. It is the lawyer's avenue to the public. However able and faithful he may be in other respects, people are slow to bring him I understand the ship to be made for the carrying and preservation of the cargo, and so long as the ship can be saved with the cargo, it should never be abandoned. This union likewise should never be abandoned unless it fails, and the possibility of its preservation shall cease to exist, without throwing passengers and cargo overboard. I go to assume a task more difficult than that which devolved upon Washington, unless the great God, who assisted him, shall be with me and aid me, I must fail. But if the same omniscient mind and almighty arm that directed and protected him shall guide and support me, I shall not fail, I shall succeed. The point, the power to hurt, of all figures lies in the truthfulness of their application. He who molds the public sentiment makes statutes and decisions possible or impossible to make. I am naturally anti-slavery. If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. I cannot remember when I did not so think and feel. He who would be no slave must consent to have no slave. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves, and, under a just God, cannot long retain it. And so far as the government lands can be disposed of, I am in favor of cutting up the wild lands into parcels so that every poor man may have a home. To the best of my judgment, I have labored for, and not against, the Union. As I have not felt, so I have not expressed any harsh sentiment towards our Southern brethren. I have constantly declared, as I really believed, the only difference between them and us is the difference of circumstances. Let the people on both sides keep their self-possession, and just as other clouds have cleared away in due time, so will this, and this great nation shall continue to prosper as before. I can express all my views on the slavery question by quotations from Henry Clay. I believe it is universally understood and acknowledged that all men will ever act correctly, unless they have a motive to do otherwise. I have always been an old line Henry Clay Whig. It would astonish, if not amuse the older citizens, to learn that I have been put down as the candidate of pride, wealth, and aristocratic family distinction. I should like to know if, taking this old Declaration of Independence, which declares that all men are equal upon principle, you begin making exceptions to it, where will you stop? If one man says it does not mean a Negro, why not another say it does not mean some other man? Upon the subject of education, not presuming to dictate any plan or system respecting it, I can only say that I view it as the most important subject which we, as a people, can be engaged in. It is a great piece of folly to attempt to make anything out of my early life. I perhaps ought to say that individually I never was much interested in the Texas question. I never could see much good to come of annexation, inasmuch as they were already a free Republican people on our own model. If the great American people will only keep their temper on both sides of the line, the troubles will come to an end, and the question which now distracts the country will be settled just as surely as all other difficulties of like character which have originated in this government have been adjusted. Whether slavery shall go into Nebraska or other new territories is not a matter of exclusive concern to the people who may go there. The whole nation is interested that the best use shall be made of these territories. We want them for the homes of free white people. The legal right of the Southern people to reclaim their fugitives I have constantly admitted. A legal right of Congress to interfere with their institution in the states I have constantly denied. Why was the amendment, expressly declaring the right of the people to exclude slavery, voted down? Plainly enough now, the adoption of it would have spoiled the niche for the Dred Scott decision. That I am not a member of any Christian church is true, but I have never denied the truth of the Scriptures, and I have never spoken with intentional disrespect of religion in general, or of any denomination of Christians in particular. We find ourselves under the government of a system of political institutions, conducing more essentially to the ends of civil and religious liberty than any of which the history of former times tells us. You may think it was a very little thing, and in these days it seems to me like a trifle. But it was a most important incident in my life. I could scarcely credit that I, the poor boy, had earned $1 in less than a day. That by honest work I had earned $1. I was a more hopeful and thoughtful boy from that time.